Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the inaugural meeting of Ben's Book Club, brought to you by OverDrive and Libby, the reading app. My name's Mal O'Brien. I'm the Australian Regional Manager for OverDrive. Now, before we start, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend this respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. So let me introduce your host for tonight, Ben Hobson. Ben, if you could turn your camera on.
Hello, everybody.
Now,
Welcome.
Ben is a Brisbane school teacher, and aside from being interested in music, philosophy, theology, and reading, he's also a very keen husband, they're his words, and father to 2 young boys. In his spare time, he hosts podcasts, interviews authors, and writes books. 3 so far: To Become a Whale in 2017, Snake Island, which came out 2019, and in early 2023, we can expect The Death of John Lacey. And now he also hosts an online book club. So Ben will be hosting these events every month from now through to December, and you can find out about these from your local library. Now, to Ben's guest tonight, his Australian author, Maryrose Cuskelly. Maryrose? Hello. So Maryrose is a freelance writer and editor. Her essays and articles have been published in a range of magazines, journals and newspapers, including The Age, The Australian, The Melbourne Magazine, Wellbeing, The Big Issue and Real Time. Last year, Maryrose won the Thunderbolt Prize for crime writing, non-fiction, for her essay, Well Before Dark. And so far, she's the author of 4 books: Original Skin, an exploration of the remarkable human hide; The End of Charity, Time for Social Enterprise; Wedderburn, and now The Crane, her latest work that we'll all be talking about tonight. So, but before I hand over to Ben and Maryrose, a couple of housekeepings. Nice shot, Ben.
Thank you.
If you'd like to ask a question, please use chat, and Ben will endeavour to get through as many of your questions as possible. If you have comments about the book, all positive, please feel free to share those, and we'll also try and address them where appropriate. Now, if you need help with OverDrive and Libby, which is how you're accessing these books through the library, the best place to go for help is your local library. And now, Ben, over to you and Maryrose, and I will disappear.
All right, well, thank you so much, Mel, and yeah, big welcome, Maryrose. Thank you so much for joining us. Very first Ben's Book Club. Thank you very much. I want to give you a round of applause. Everyone else is as well. It's just weird that it's just me doing it. Welcome. How are you?
Very well, and I'm really delighted to be the inaugural book for Ben's Book Club. And actually, Malcolm said that I won the Thunderbolt last year. In fact, it was 2016. I just have to make that small correction. But no, I'm really excited to be here and to talk about the cane.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it with you too. And just before we get started, I do want to say I'm really, really keen on starting this book club out and being really, really invitational. So everyone who's attending, appreciate you all, but I really want to ask some questions from you all, because I think one of the most fun things to do when we're reading authors' books is to actually get the author to chat with them. And if you have any questions or thoughts or comments for Maryrose, I would love for you to write those in the chat. But I want to start here, Maryrose, if that's okay with you. Releasing a book out into the world, any new book, is a really fun, really adventurous thing to do. And I was wanting to know, what has been like the biggest, most exciting thing that's happened because of the cane? Like a conversation, or, you know, you've just had one of those profound things that's happened at an event. What's been the most exciting thing that's happened with the release of this book?
Oh, that's kind of difficult. Look, the things I've really appreciated is when people say, you know, you got the time, like the 70s in Queensland, exactly right. And I've had a couple of people say that to me, and that really does mean, you know, I'm really glad that I kind of pulled that off, because, you know, that sense of an authentic time, an authentic place is kind of so central to the book. And so I think that was really, having that feedback just made me feel really great about the book and what what it had come to be.
Yeah, and that must speak to the amount of research you've done, and I'm assuming here too, and I'm sort of, again, I'm already starting off by jumping ahead with my questions, but it's an authentic sort of lived experience of yours, right? Like you're actually writing from a place of yeah, you experienced a lot of these things in your childhood. Is that correct, or am I wrong on that?
Yeah, no, well, I grew up in southeast Queensland, and the cane is set obviously in North Queensland. So I didn't grow up in the cane fields, but I grew up in rural Queensland in the 70s. And so I did do a lot of research. Like I really went back to going back to newspapers of the time, not just for to reconnect with those facts of some child abductions and things that happened back then, but also just advertisements about clothes or columns about what to cook for dinner or things like that. So they really reminded me and helped kind of get me back into that, I don't know, just remembering not just the things that happened, but the way things felt, the way things smelt and looked and all those things.
That's such a huge difference though, like that idea that you're not just listing a bunch of things, but it's how those things felt during that time. That's almost impossible to get right unless you've actually had some experience of the thing, I think.
I suppose people write historical novels, all the time in places they haven't been. But just being able to get the texture of a place. I know that's kind of doesn't seem, when you're talking about reading, talking about textures, maybe a little, it's a bit of a leap, but there's something about the texture of the time. And also what I was really tried to do was to, that sound, like the soundtrack, the way people spoke, and was really central to, for me, for the success of the book. So, and I think I was able to recall those voices from that time. I think just, being, I don't know, but the voices were obviously really important to the book, and the way people spoke and the way they spoke about things as well, like whether it was women's liberation or the way to raise children or whatever, just so those and they all they'll just contributing to the sound texture, I suppose, of the book.
Well, I mean, I'll read a couple of comments. We've got a few people in the chat already, which is really cool. Actually, can I just say really quickly, if you could, can you please just let us know which library you attend? We'd love to sort of connect, geographically, if you could. But Megan has said, really enjoyed the cane. I grew up in that part of the world and it was really evocative. I remember the cane cinders falling like snow. So you've obviously really captured that authentic feeling, right? And then down here, Robin has said, the texture of the cane itself was very tactile. And so that's pretty incredible that you didn't grow up in like the cane territory, but you went and traveled there for your research. Is that correct?
That's true. And also I went to boarding school in Toowoomba, but there were kids from that part of Queensland who went to school as well there. And so some of those details I've kind of stolen from conversations with them, but they used to call it, Mackay snow or whatever. And this friend of mine, Elizabeth, would talk about how, she remembered the cinders like falling into their swimming pool and things like that. And it's such, so I was able to kind of, I had remembered those and stole them and just, inserted them in.
That's so cool. And that, it again speaks to just, the authentic level of detail you've put in this novel. I wanted to go back a little bit, if that's okay, just to, what's birthed this author, Maryrose Cuskelly. On your website, I found this quote about yourself, and I don't know how you feel about people reading out quotes you've said to you, but I always feel a bit strange. Like, did I really say that? But you said, I'm interested in stories that take on the complexity of human character and behavior in ways that are compassionate, wise, and ultimately hopeful. That's why I read, and that's why I write. And I thought that was really cool. And I was wondering what aspects of that sort of idea about reading and writing and, I guess, complexity and compassion, how much of that is in the cane in your mind?
Oh, look, I hope a lot of that's in the cane. You know, I wanted, well, for instance, with the, you know, the at the heart of the book and what begins the book is, oh, you know, the book begins 4 weeks after the disappearance of this girl, Janet McClimate. And I didn't want that disappearance of Janet just to be the inciting incident, if you like, of this succession of events. I wanted that disappearance of a young girl and the grief and the fear and the dread and the, you know, the terrible pain that it leaves in the lives of people who knew her and just in the community. I wanted that to be something that was all through the novel. Yeah. So I guess I'm hope that speaks to that, my words on the website. And also I wanted, I suppose, just that, you know, and I wanted, you know, Janet's parents who were dealing with this loss of their child, I wanted to accord them, you know, even though they are, you know, beside themselves, they're, you know, so they, I wanted there to be a dignity in their grief as well. So I guess that speaks to that. And also I wanted, I suppose, even though the book is about, you know, this terrible event, this girl disappearing, I wanted there to be, you know, good people within the book. So, you know, it was important to me that there were, you know, good men in the book, that it wasn't, you know, that there was still, even though there was this terrible event, that there were people in that community who were good people and who were, you know, that they're not that it's a book about hope necessarily, but just that there was a level of compassion and a level of goodness to be found in it.
I think it's a very hopeful book. Like just the way the town sort of, I mean, obviously it's such a difficult situation, and the town does have its divisions, but I think there's also a lot in there about how people can come together as well. Like I definitely think there's a lot of hope in that. And I think too, like with the compassion, I just found your book really non-judgmental. Like it doesn't sort of look at the characters in a way that's, you know, pointing a finger at them morally. You sort of just present them as they are with all of their hopes and dreams. And I thought that was really cool too, like the compassion that you showed each of your characters. I was wondering, and this is a strange sort of question, but this is sort of going back to your process a little bit. You were at one stage planning to become an actor. Is that correct? Or you were an actor?
I was, well, yes. Well, yeah. I spent more time trying to be an actor than being an actor. But no, yeah, I was. But I think there was lots of actors apparently. Yeah. So no. So I did. Yeah. So I was an actor for a while, and yeah. And I suppose that, you know, writing was a way to continue to be a creative person, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, I was wondering, like, if the acting sort of allows you to sort of inhabit the mind and the ideas of other people more easily, maybe, and that's why all the characters are dealt with so compassionately. Do you think like that acting craft can inform your writing a little bit?
Perhaps. I think it's like one thing with, you know, I suppose I remember from, you know, being an actor and that, you know, finding like a character is, you know, you're trying to find different rhythms of, you know, whether it's speaking, of movement, those sorts of things. And so I suppose in trying to find, and because the cane does have a number of perspectives and a number of voices within it, that perhaps, I don't know, that does help with kind of, you know, identifying and kind of creating a different voice for all those different characters, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah. I really feel like that came through, like that idea that, yeah, you're playing all these characters, you know, and it's just such an interesting way to go about writing fiction. I've got a quote here, from the chat. I've got a chat message here from Mark. So Marcus said this about your book, and he said he's lived in Cairns 1970 to 71, and the social atmosphere in the cane is spot on. This is what we were talking about earlier, right? Like you really nailed that stuff. And knew people like the teacher and actually had a secret copy at school of the Little Red School Book, and you brought all of that back. So that's a really cool comment from Mark. But the Little Red School Book, I hadn't heard of this before. I was born in the mid '80s, so I hadn't nothing to do with this book. But what can you tell us about the book and what role it plays in your novel?
Yeah, well, so the Little Red School Book was published in the late 60s by these, well, it was written in the late 60s by these Danish school teachers. And it was deliberately, printed on cheap paper so that school kids could afford it. So, and it was taken up all over the world and like translated into numerous languages, and it eventually found its way to Australia. So it was kind of, obviously a play on, Mao's Little Red Book or whatever. And it was kind of, it aimed to give young people kind of plain, pragmatic information, not just about sex and drugs, but sex and drugs as well, but just things about how to, kind of find their way in the world, how to interrogate authority, how to kind of embrace their own autonomy, their own power. And when it just created enormous fuss, and they banned its importation in Australia, but then they started to publish it in Australia, and it was banned, but it was banned in schools and that sort of thing. So this is, I'm not sure who would have been Prime Minister at the time, perhaps McMahon, but Don Chipp, who went on to form the Democrats, he was the minister responsible for, I can't remember his title, but he was actually trying to say, look, don't, if you make such a fuss about it, if you try and ban it, it's just going to...
If you ban it, they want to read it more. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
So, but it did cause an enormous amount of fuss. And this was one of the things that I kind of, when I was researching, just reading newspapers, the letters about the Little Red School Book and how it was going to encourage licentiousness and anarchy in our schools. And so it, and I suppose the furor about it just reflected a broader anxiety about the cultural change and the social change and the political changes that were all kind of, if not here already, were kind of on the horizon. So it was at a time where, Germaine Greer had published The Female Eunuch. Vietnam War was still going on. There were demonstrations about, against the Springbok tour in Australia.
Wow.
Yeah, so there was lots going on. And so I think the Little Red School Book just came to epitomise that fear, and that, we're all going to hell in a handcart, and if we could. Yeah. So, and so I actually tracked down a copy. It was at the Balliol Library, which is the library at Melbourne Uni here. So I had to, don my white gloves and, open it up on a cushion so as not to break the spine. But I urge all of you, and those of you who have children, to read it, to give it to your children, and because a lot of the information is still very kind of relevant. And
wow. So you're definitely like a rebel now, like you're anti-authoritarian and all those things. You've been brainwashed.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh well, that's a tragedy. So, if you don't mind, I'm just going to keep reading some things from chat. I just, this stuff is really fun. I just want to give people a place to connect with you. Just a lot of really a lot of positive reviews, I guess you'd call these. So Anne-Marie has said that she's really enjoyed the cane and found the voices used in the narrative to tell a story. And there was a level of intrigue that just got her turning the pages, which is really cool. Eve has said absolutely loved it, and you captured the scenario really well, and haven't read a book like it, which is a really big compliment. Actually, on that, can I ask, because when I do this sort of thing, I try to listen to a few interviews you've done, but I heard that you say once that you weren't actually setting out to write a typical crime book. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, I was actually not trying to write, I was trying not to write a crime novel.
Oh, actively trying not to write one.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
and not because I have a disdain for the genre. It's kind of it was like the opposite. So this was my first full-length fiction work.
Yeah.
And like crime writing just seemed to me like, it's got to have, there's all these kind of boxes you have to tick. It has to have, different suspects, and it's got to have red herrings, and it's got to be all tied up neatly at the end. And I thought, I just don't know that I can do that. And so when I wrote the manuscript and I submitted it to Allen and Unwin, and they said yes, they want to publish it. And I was saying, but like, it isn't crime fiction. It's a coming of age story with a bit of Australian Gothic, because I sort of was thinking of it more in that trope of the lost child, which kind of goes back to, Frederick McCubbin's paintings of, the girl lost in the eucalyptus forest to, Dot and the kangaroo, all that sort of stuff. So, and then, but my publisher sort of was like, no, it's crime. As a girl, it's crime. And then they gave it to the editor, Louise Hertel, who she had worked with Peter Temple, so she knew all about crime.
Oh, wow.
And so she was saying, she kind of encouraged me to lean more heavily into, conventional crime fiction conventions. And she was right in that the way that I'd written it was a bit like, because I was inexperienced as a fiction writer, there were some things I just hadn't done properly. Like they just, she just said, look, just make make the plot more propulsive, and just kind of tone down, because I had a few there are still some Gothic kind of elements in it, but I had the Gothic was dialed up a bit in the first draft. So she just said, tone that down a bit, and I ended up putting some of that stuff into the voice of Arthur, who's the first person voice in the novel. So and I wasn't, I was a little bit resistant, mainly because I thought, I just don't want people to pick up a book with that cover thinking I'm going to get a crime fiction or a thriller, and then just go, oh, hang on, what's this? Like, it's not.
Yeah, so you thought the difference might mean that people who are used to the crime tropes might not enjoy your novel as much.
Yes. But Louise she just did a fantastic job in that she was able to maintain my confidence in what I was trying to do and in the book and the things that were important to me in the book, while at the same time just helping me structure it to make it a more satisfying read. And I think she was right, and I was very obedient, and I did what she told me to, and I think The Cane's a better book because of that.
Editors are the best, aren't they? Like they're so smart, they know so much, and they just, I don't know how you go taking the first notes though. Like, when you first got those notes, did you feel, oh no, and just like hang your head like this? Like I heard that Robert Lukens cried on the toilet for a few hours after he got his editing notes back. How did you go? Were you were like, yes, I've got this, or?
I was, because there was pages and pages of them, and I'm just like, do I have the stomach for this?
Yeah.
And but because Louise was she was just so kind of pragmatic in the way she was kind of telling me, and there were some things that she said to me that just made me go, oh, that's so obvious. Like, why didn't I see that?
Man,
but that's the beauty of having someone who's a bit of a distance to your manuscript, because they can see those things that you're so immersed in it that you don't see it. So what I did, which was really good, was that I had friends who had a beach house And so I took myself off to that beach house by myself, and that's when I did all those revisions. And that was and kind of yes, that was a really good thing to do. And I kind of, because Louise had, she was really was able to say, these are the things that I really love about the novel, and keep those in there, and they're really great, and I love the voice, and da-da-da. So she was able to doing that with the same, so she was very clever about telling me which bits were bad and which bits were.
As a teacher, they call that the sandwich method. So you put the positive here, and then the thing and then the other positive. So you come out, that's a nice sandwich, but yeah. So I've got a couple more comments I'd love to read. Where is it? This one was really cool. This person is dialed in from Berlin. Which is full on. That's so cool. And that's Ranjana. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. And said, I'm reading the book right now and love the authenticity, and very specifically pointed out Arthur's voice being so authentic. Can you talk a little bit about where Arthur's voice came from for you? Because I found the same thing. Like I growing up in a small town in Victoria, he just rang so true. Like I feel like I was having a conversation with an old bloke at the pub that sounded exactly like him. So where did that voice come from for you?
Look, I think it just came partly, maybe from my dad, but also just and other men from that era. Like, so it was kind of it's kind of the voice of my childhood or something, or the just and of the time, I guess. But I think it was just I came like and Arthur too, because he has that. He kind of operates like a Greek chorus. He gives us that wider view of the town, but also the history of the town and what's happened before and what's gone on and that sort of thing. So, so I guess he's and he has that advantage of almost seeing all, knowing all, or something. But and I guess I tried to imbue him with a bit of kind of wisdom and perhaps more more progressive ideas, and perhaps men of that generation and that may have had. But I think it's kind of the voice of my childhood, so I didn't find it difficult to kind of lock on or lock into Arthur's voice. I found that quite easy to do.
That's awesome. It's sort of like you're playing the role as you're writing him. Hey, that's really cool. There's some other great, the chat here is absolutely amazing. I almost don't have to do any research at all. There's some really great questions. I really thought this was an interesting question from Robin. Robin has asked, was there a conscious effort to capture the Aussie supportive small town community bond? So is that something you specifically wanted to layer in there, as you were talking about earlier, trying to capture that some positive things about local Australian communities, or is that just something that came naturally?
No, I think that, I suppose I was just trying to portray a community with its fractures as well as its, connection, I guess. Because there are some fairly profound cracks in that community, but I think there are in lots of communities. But I guess I was also trying to I suppose I just wanted to portray a realistic community with both its connections and its fractures. So I'm glad they think that sorry, was it Robin?
Yes, Robin. There's actually another question too from Vanessa, or a comment. And she says, I found the themes really interesting and relevant to the times. And this is sort of talking about what you were just mentioning, this idea of like there's fractures in the community. Because it says here an undercurrent of racism, child abuse, and then this I think is really specific and interesting, how the adults kind of try to just, nope, it's not happening, sort of push things down, like hiding things that are a little unpleasant, like the Little Red School Book.
Yeah.
Were those things that are like really important to you to get in there, or is it just through instinct that you're writing this novel and these sorts of things get layered in there as you write?
Look, I think it's largely intuitive. And I guess I remembered kind of from my own childhood that, and I suppose a lot of, so Essie, who's the 11-year-old girl who Janet, who's gone missing, used to babysit.
Yeah.
She's at that age where, like, she's not quite an adolescent, like she's about to, become an adolescent. She's still a child, and she has that child, she wants to know more.
Mm-hmm.
And her parents, particularly her mother, are trying to keep her in childhood for a bit longer. And I suppose this, Janet's disappearance and the speculation about what has happened to her, they're trying to protect Essie from that. And I suppose I remember that same kind of frustration, and also that sort of, that trepidation of, as a child, wanting to know more, but knowing, once you know stuff, you can't unknow it.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And so I guess, and I think it, at that time, and particularly, like, Queensland was a very conservative place, like back in the 70s. Joh Bjelke-Petersen was premier, and he was quite an authoritarian figure, and lots of people in Queensland liked that. Like, he was premier for, I don't know, I forget how many years, but a long, long time.
Yes.
And he tried to kind of portray himself as this benevolent dictator, and whether he was benevolent or not, well, history has decided that maybe not so much. And so there was a bit of we'll tell you things that you need to know for your own good, and we will do things for your own good. You don't need to worry about that, was a lot of what Joh Bjelke-Petersen was on about, that, he didn't want a lot of discussion or debate in society. And I think that did kind of filter down a bit.
Yeah, it's such I can relate to that as a parent. There's certain things I don't want to show my children just yet. I do want to sort of, like, that's such an instinctual thing. Like, no, just be little for a little bit longer. My precious kids. So yeah, I can relate, and this is, I think, again, the brilliance of your book. I can relate to Essie, and I can relate to her mum Connie. I can relate to both of them, and I can see them both on equal footing, which is really cool. Can we go back? I want to talk really quickly about your essay, which won the New England Thunderbolt Prize for non-fiction crime writing. Is that correct? And that was called Well Before Dark.
Yeah.
So I had a bit of a read of that. So that's centered on the true crime case of Marilyn Wallman, and she lived on a sugarcane farm. And so there's obviously a lot of inspiration in her story that's woven into the cane, but with the cane, because you fictionalized it, I'm assuming that there's lots of differences in how that works. I'm just curious as to, why did you do this as fiction as opposed to just sort of leaving it sit there as your award-winning essay?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's almost exactly 50 years today that Marilyn went missing. Just
wow, really?
And there was just something in the I saw on the ABC news site yesterday that her family have just approached the state government, because I think there's a reward that's been offered for a long time of $250,000 for the information leading to her, any information leading to identifying the perpetrator of her murder, and they've just asked the government to increase it to $1 million. So
wow, that's so amazing. They're still wanting, of course they would, but that's incredible. 50 years later, they're still looking for that justice.
Yes. And I suppose I kind of want to acknowledge that kind of, and I suppose that's why I was so keen for Janet's disappearance to be something that, like I said, was not just the inciting incident, that it was something that was present throughout the novel. So Marilyn Wallman went missing in 1972. I was a bit younger than her, but like her, I was a country kid walking to school. And then 2 years before Marilyn went missing, these other two little girls had been murdered in Townsville. So, and I remember around that time, you know, the kind of the anxiety of my mother particularly, but other adults around this, you know, stranger danger and, you know, never accepting lifts and that sort of thing. And because there was something about those details, particularly of Marilyn's disappearance, in that she was, you know, riding her bike along this track between two cane fields. Her brothers, who were younger than her, were followed on about 10 minutes later, and they found her bicycle lying on its side, and Marilyn, like, you know, and the front wheel was still spinning, and Marilyn had disappeared.
Wow. Yeah.
And Rex, her younger brother, stayed by her bicycle while David, who was a little bit older, went back to get their mother. And Rex was only 9 at the time. And while Rex was there by the bike, he heard Marilyn calling out in the cane. So I think there's something about those, I don't know how you can hear those kind of those details and have it not kind of lodge somewhere.
Absolutely right.
It had just stayed with me all this time. And then in 2014, you know, I was kind of looking for something to write about, and I thought about writing about Marilyn's disappearance. And, you know, so I started researching it. And then just by kind of happenstance, around that time, there'd been a couple of what they had hoped would be developments in finding out what had happened to her, and that, you know, there was a backyard. Someone had given some information to the police in Mackay, and they were digging up a backyard in Mackay that didn't yield anything. And then in early 2015, there was an announcement that this piece of bone that someone had found a couple of years after she went missing did belong to Marilyn. And so that was the first definitive evidence the family had that she was dead. I mean, obviously they had believed she was dead, but this was kind of evidence. And so they had this, you know, they had some of her remains, and so they didn't have a funeral for her till 2015. So
so sad, hey, like
it's heartbreaking. And her parents are still alive. And Rex, you know, who had been that little boy by the bicycle, you know, he's been their family's spokesperson over the years, and they've really worked hard to keep Marilyn's case, you know, kind of in public awareness, and because, you know, they're hoping for a breakthrough. And anyway, I contacted Rex later in 2015. I was going up to Mackay to do some research, and I asked if we could meet, and so we met. And he said he would talk to the family about whether they would be prepared to cooperate in me writing a book about Marilyn's disappearance, but also the family since then and the efforts they'd gone to. And in the end, they just sort of came back to me, and it was that they didn't want to do that. And in some ways, I think it was kind of almost, because I just had that funeral, it was almost, you know, it was kind of too soon, I suppose. Anyway, I ended up writing the essay, which I showed to Rex, and they were comfortable with me publishing. So, yeah. But then so I thought, well, that's it. I won't, you know, I've done what I could. But it kind of kept with me still, and so I began to think about fiction, and I realized some of the things that I was interested in, I'd have more freedom to write about in fiction. And some of those things were just about my memories of being a child with that kind of swirling around, also just about, you know, the 70s and everything that was going on then. This idea of, which is prevalent in the cane, of this malevolent presence in the cane and what might have generated that. So fiction was just presented this, you know, just a kind of bigger field in which I could play. Yeah. So, and there was just more that I wanted to say and explore about all those issues around Marilyn's disappearance. And
I guess it would be pretty full on to put words into people's mouths, like people who really existed, but obviously because it's fiction, you're sort of able to invent a lot and, like you say, explore themes and things that are related to that, but it's not the same thing. It's completely separate. Which, yeah, I
Yes.
think.
Yeah. So the cane has, you know, obviously a similar landscape, and there's a similar crime.
Yeah.
But the rest of it is not like is not the story of Marilyn, and it's not the story of Marilyn's family. Like it's very different.
Yeah. And speaking of just the book in general, but I just want to burrow down into Essie, because I loved Essie. I found just, you know, the way that she's sort of waking up to the world just to be so relatable. But and, you know, talking earlier about you being roughly growing up in the same age as Essie, like how much of you and your personality is in that character?
Oh, look, I don't know that my personality is like Essie, but there's something about, you know, the way Essie views the world, I think, that is perhaps similar to me at that age, and that kind of, you know, wanting to, you know, wanting to be older, wanting to know more, wanting to, you know, just find stuff out, I suppose.
She's so curious. Like the character is just always looking and always thinking about, like, what does that mean, and why did that person do that with that person? And yeah, she's just so curious about the world.
Yes, but in a kind of a, you know, she's I don't want to call her sly, but you know, she has you know, there's something about her that, you know, she doesn't she's not an open book, I don't think, Essie, to her family. Like, you know, she's a little bit, you know,
she's careful.
She's careful.
Yeah. Raylene, I guess, is kind of the opposite of that, in that she's just, you know, throwing things at the wall and just like she's just all out there. Like she's not a shut off book. She's just really vivacious. Is that where you sort of found that interest in like creating those two characters? Is that she was sort of provoking Essie's sort of like reservedness?
Yeah, and I think, you know, there were girls like that when I was, you know, growing up, who were kind of a bit bolder, a bit more worldly wise, and I kind of wanted, you know, there was part of me that really wanted to be like that, but was never quite brave enough. And
yeah, can totally relate to that.
It was kind of like I didn't want to be bad, but I wanted to be friends with the bad girls, you know.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Which is kind of like a curse, like I was, but and I think and I like girls like Raylene, like they're so kind of disruptive, and they kind of cause such alarm because they are so kind of, you know, brazen, and you know, and particularly back then where, you know, girls, you know, didn't kind of feel like, you know, it didn't feel like girls had the same autonomy or the same you know, I don't know, just the recognition of the world that, or by the world that boys had. Yeah. And I think that's changed a lot, but Raylene was kind of, you know, she's quite disruptive, you know, I think. And you know, people, and I think people like the adults in her life, or are kind of right to be a little fearful for her, because
but fearful of her, but fearful for her as well, like in her living situation. Like they're equal parts sympathetic, but maybe not so sympathetic as to actually. Oh no, they do invite her in, they do help her out.
I mean, they try, but she's so kind of like, I don't, you know, I'm doing my thing, just.
Yeah. So she's a realistic teenage character. Well done, I think. I'm going to finish off with two last questions. So I just want to invite the chat again, if anyone's got anything else they want to ask. We've got a lot of really positive comments on it. But I want to finish off with just my big questions on one of the themes that I thought was really interesting about the novel was this idea of you can't really look at a thing and know a thing. You know, you can't judge a book by its cover. And like, I think that there's a lot of characters, and there's even the Little Red Book, even the not to give away anything, but even the crime itself that the book centers on, it's you don't really know just by looking at a thing at a glimpse what the ramifications of that thing are. Is that something that interests you, this like digging deeper underneath like surface level?
Yes. I mean, I don't know that you would write a book if you weren't,
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's fair. Yep.
Yes. Yeah, I think I am interested in those things. And I guess I am interested in, one of my favorite characters actually is Ern, the headmaster. Because, sorry, I'm not quite sure how this relates, but he's got this kind of blustery exterior, and what could be conceived as this quite conservative outlook, but actually he, I feel like, he's someone who has a real concern for, the students that he teaches, the younger teachers in his care. Even though he's got this, like, and I remember this so clearly from like the 70s, like teachers were kind of, they were masters of their domain, and the domain was the school.
We still are masters of our domain.
Oh, sorry, yes. But I don't know that you would knock your students' heads together literally, but back then, that's exactly what would happen.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore.
You don't do that anymore. So I think, and he's, he is, and so when, Eamon gets into trouble for trying to spread around the Little Red School Book, Ern has this, he wants to save Eamon from himself.
Yeah, he's like protective. He's so, that's absolutely what I'm talking about. Like he could be this, mustache twirling archetype of this stern Ern sort of guy, right? But he's not. His motivations are really interesting and good and complex, and I think that's just one of the most rewarding things about your novel is that every character is given that little moment to sort of have their own world fleshed out, and there's no sort of mustache twirling evil villain. And I just thought that was much more of a morally complex thing, and I just absolutely enjoyed reading the Cane. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I just might finish off with one last question from our chat here. This is Ranjana again, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Oh, sorry, no, this is from Robin. And Robin's asking about the title. To begin with, just coming up with the title, how long did that take you? And because I hate titles, and it's one of the most aggravating things, and you seem to be really good at it. And then, sorry, but just, going back, sorry, what was the one before? Well Before Dark. Like that is such a good title as well, yeah. So the title, but then also Robin was wanting to unpack like the meaning of cane. Like cane is sugar, it's sweet, it's good, but it can be obviously also a cane, and what we were talking about with the school. So it can be sort of seen as punishment. Was that stuff going through your mind as you came up with the title?
Not really. Actually, what's Well Before Dark, just there was that list of
I had the list
quite a bit in the Cane as well. One of the things was that the police minister had urged parents to impress upon their children was that to be home well before dark. It just has a nice.
It's amazing. It's such a good title. Yeah.
But with the Cane, I actually had quite a different. My title was slightly different. My working title was Coming from the Cane. Just because I had seen when I was researching Marilyn's disappearance, there was just a line in one of the newspapers about Rex, her brother, hearing her cries coming from the cane, and I liked the rhythm of it.
That's really yeah.
But when my publisher and my editor got hold of it, they just went, "No, it's the cane. We just need something short." Can we? No, I said maybe just from the cane. No, the cane. So, and I guess just from a purely kind of commercial perspective, that they were trying to say, well, it's kind of like the dry. It's like so for them, it helped them place that in a commercial sense.
I think that's true. Like I think the cane sounds much more like a crimey sort of, I mean, look at it, right? Like it looks like you're going to have this page turner. But coming from the cane, that sounds like what you were talking about earlier, like the coming of age,
Yes.
that sort of thing. So that's interesting how they can do that.
Yeah. Yes, but as I didn't really think of it as being, as in a like, getting the cuts, getting 6 of the best with the cane, but
you can steal that though from Robin. Robin, I think is when she puts it out there, it's okay. So if you want to,
yes, that's what I was thinking about. But yeah.
Oh yeah,
but the cane too, because it is that, for me, it is that kind of the avatar for the menace and the what has gone before, in that community in terms of like, going way back. So from the way the environment was kind of obliterated to plant the cane, how the traditional owners and were, driven off or killed, the way the native animals were dispersed, the way South Sea Islanders were brought in and enforced labour. So it's kind of it's a bit fanciful, but it's kind of like the avatar for all that menace and that we see in the novel.
That is a great answer to that question, though. That's amazing. It's, I appreciate you, Maryrose. I want to just finish up with one last question. I want to also thank everyone for being a part of the book club today. It's been awesome reading your comments and your questions, and it's one of the best things being a part of this. And Maryrose, just you've been absolutely wonderful giving your time to us today. But I want to finish with, have you got like a plan for the next thing? Is there something else that's brewing?
Yes, I am working on a novel at the moment.
Okay.
I don't think it's crime, but maybe it will. Maybe it will be.
Maybe it's accidentally crime again. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But this time it is. It's urban and it's more contemporary, so quite a different territory in that way. Anyway, from.
Oh well, cool. We're very excited for anything that you will release. Thank you so much for your time, and Mel, I'll invite you back in to conclude everything. But just Maryrose, really appreciate how generous you've been with all your answers tonight.
I'm just so thrilled to be part of the book club, and thanks so much for all your comments about the cane. And I'm thrilled that it's kind of finding an audience and finding people who really connect with it on, all the different levels that I'd hoped for it.
Well, thanks, Ben. Thanks, Maryrose. Maryrose, that was fabulous. That was just such a great explanation of how your book came about. And Ben, thank you very much for your questions. And look, we're going to do this every month. So Ben's having another guest every month to discuss a book that's coming out, a new book coming out in Australia. The next one's on the 26th of April. And if you've enjoyed this, tell your friends and get them to come along. But that's it for tonight, folks. And I hope to see you all again in April.
Thanks, Malcolm.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Maryrose.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.